Attention is Your Real Life by Jason Gray, January 2nd, 2026, 6026, Anno Lucis, in the Year of Light, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Most people believe their life is defined by what happens to them, the events, the circumstances, the disruptions, the turning points they can point to and say, that is when things changed. This belief feels intuitive, but it is wrong. Events pass quickly, even the significant ones. What remains is not the event itself, but what the mind repeatedly returns to afterward. What lingers? What is rehearsed? What is silently given time, energy, and emotional weight long after the moment has ended? A person's life is not shaped by events. It is shaped by attention. Attention is where life actually unfolds. This is difficult for people to accept because attention feels invisible. It feels passive, like background noise. Attention is not neutral. It is an act of allocation. Wherever it goes, energy follows, meaning follows, identity follows. Over time, you follow. This is why two people can experience the same loss, the same conflict, the same disappointment, and emerge living entirely different lives. One becomes narrowed, bitter, and constrained. The other becomes quieter, clearer, and more precise. The difference is not resilience or strength of character. It is where attention was placed and how long it was allowed to stay there. The fracture begins when attention is no longer consciously chosen. Most people do not decide what they attend to. Their attention is pulled by fear, by unresolved emotion, by habit, by repetition. It is captured by whatever generates the strongest internal reaction. Over time, this creates grooves. Thought patterns deepen. Emotional responses become predictable. The mind begins returning to the same places automatically, like a well-worn path walked so often it no longer requires choice. This is how attention becomes a prison without bars. People confuse constant mental activity with awareness. They mistake rumination for insight. They believe that thinking something repeatedly means they are working through it, when in reality, they are reinforcing it. Attention gives things weight simply by revisiting them. This creates the illusion of depth, when what is actually happening is stagnation. A person can spend years thinking about their life without ever actually seeing it. They remain internally busy, while externally unchanged. Life continues to move forward, but they experience it through a fog of preoccupation. This state is not accidental. A person whose attention is scattered is easier to influence. A person who is constantly reacting is easier to steer. A person who is mentally elsewhere is rarely able to notice what is being done to them or what they are quietly agreeing to. This is why attention is so aggressively competed for, not because it entertains you, but because it forms you. What you attend to determines what you notice. What you notice determines what you believe matters. What you believe matters determines how you act. How you act repeatedly becomes your life. The reorientation does not begin with control. Forcing attention only creates tension. Fighting thought gives it more energy. Attention cannot be commanded into clarity. It must be reclaimed. Reclaiming attention begins with a simple but unfamiliar recognition. You do not have to follow every thought that appears. You do not have to finish every internal argument. You do not have to solve problems that do not yet exist. Thoughts arise automatically. Attention does not have to follow. When you stop feeding certain thoughts with attention, they weaken, not through effort, but through neglect. Without energy, they lose urgency. Without urgency, they lose authority. What remains is space. In that space, something subtle but powerful happens. the body begins to register again. The environment becomes visible. The tone of the moment reveals itself. You begin to feel the difference between what is actually demanding action and what is merely loud, habitual, or emotionally charged. This is where discernment returns. A person who regains their attention regains proportion. They stop magnifying threats and minimizing their own capacity. They no longer confuse noise with importance. They act when action is required and refrain when it is not, without guilt, without explanation. This is not discipline. It is not effort. It is clarity. Clarity emerges when attention is no longer squandered. Most people are exhausted not because life is inherently overwhelming, but because their attention is fragmented across too many false priorities, unresolved stories, imagined futures, and inherited fears. They are tired from carrying what was never meant to be carried. When attention returns to the present, life simplifies. Not because problems disappear, but because they shrink to their actual size. Energy is no longer drained by what cannot be changed or controlled. From this cleaner ground, real movement becomes possible. Not frantic movement, not desperate movement, but precise, intentional movement, rooted in what is real. What you give your attention to today is what your life quietly becomes. Jason Gray. It's funny because thinking about it, after I read this, I realized that I didn't really understand that where you place your attention is what you get more of in life until about 13 years ago when I read this book called Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future and a Way to Get There From Here by Bruce Lipton and Steve Behrman. And I loved that book. It's pretty scientific, and I like when science proves stuff like this. And it's odd to think about that before reading that book, I didn't have the understanding that what you pay attention to grows. Because once you learn that, it becomes unbelievably obvious. And it's so easy to see how true it is in your life once you start paying attention to that fact. It's been really important for me lately. I very badly broke my leg 2.5 months ago, a little over, and there was 4 spiral fractures in my tibia and fibula, and I had to get a major surgery with 15 pieces of metal, plates, a rod, screws, pins, inserted into my leg. And I know that if, I could have let my attention go to how horrible I thought it was that this happened, or potentially oh, my life will never be the same again, or my leg would never be the same again. But I didn't let my attention go there. Instead, I've taken my attention to healing, to the other things in my life that I can be grateful for, and the miraculous ability of my body to integrate that metal and to heal itself, because it is miraculous. And since I've done that, I have healed remarkably well. I am months ahead of schedule. My physical therapist told me that I wouldn't be able to dance again until the end of 2026. And I've already been out dancing 3 times to live music, and I'm not even 3 months out from surgery. So that's pretty cool. He also told me that I wouldn't ride my bike until this autumn, and I rode my bike about a week ago. So that's a very current example of how what I pay attention to in my life is what I get more of. And I wanted to read that reading today because I think it is basically one of the most important things that people can gain an understanding of in life, to gain more control over what happens to them and where their life goes. So thank you for being here with me today.